Good morning, everybody. I am so happy to be back here today with Emma Cooper joining us again. It's been a while since you've been with us, hasn't it? Yeah, a couple of months at least.
At least,
right?
I've been working a lot.
Yes, you have. Last time you were with us, you were talking to us about templates. But today, Emma's going to be talking to us about accessibility. So I am so excited to hear what she has to say. We have a lot of new features around managing troubleshooting along with accessibility. She's going to give us some best practices and tips that we can use to make our apps more accessible. So Emma, I'm going to let you introduce your topic, and then you can get started and tell us what you want to show us.
Oh, sure. So today I more wanted to go over just kind of some accessibility basics, really starting at accessibility like 100 level, just because a lot of people actually aren't aware of, or I've heard they're like, what's a screen reader?
I know. I'm one of these people.
Yeah. So I want to start from basics, talking about what it means to create an accessible app and what's involved in that, as well as how PowerApps can help you make accessible apps and what you need in order to do there, as well as some tips for how to make your apps accessible.
Okay, I can't wait. Do you want to share a screen and kind of show us?
I will share my screen right now, and hopefully everyone will be able to see it.
Oh, I'm sure. We have Todd on the line with us too, one of our accessibility engineering SMEs. He'll be helping us as well today.
Can everyone see my screen? Should be able to.
It looks good for me.
Awesome.
Todd, can you confirm?
Yeah. So yeah. Basically, PowerApps, if you've used it before and edited any app or created any app, there's a lot of flexibility and different customizations that you can do. But this also allows you to perhaps unintentionally create inaccessible things. And so it goes back to the saying, with great power comes great responsibility, and keeping in mind the design of your app can actually affect how different people interact with it. And so it's important to think about this if your intention is to create an accessible app while you're going through the design phase, not just creating it and then at the end of the line, 2 days before your deadline, you're like, you know what, I need to make it accessible.
Yes.
It's probably not the best way to go about it.
All the way through,
yes.
Right? Yes.
And so that's really when you have to start thinking about it in order to do it properly. And so what do we mean when we say accessible app? So there's a couple different items that go into making an accessible app. One is enabling keyboard support. So what this means is that you're able to use your keyboard or different interactions on your phone and see the focus on the different elements on the screen in order to interact with it.
Yep. Okay.
You also need to provide screen reader support. And so screen reader is actually a tool available on a bunch of different devices that actually reads out the different elements in the DOM of your web page or app or whatever.
Is that a third-party thing that you buy?
So oftentimes it's available within the device that you have. So on Windows 10, you have Narrator, which works with Edge, and that's available out of the box. That's one that we support. Other ones that are available are VoiceOver on iOS. I'll add
these links to the description so you don't have to worry about
it. They're not links. They're here. Let me show you the ones we support. So screen reader support, Windows, Edge and Narrator, macOS, Safari and VoiceOver, Android, the PowerApps app with TalkBack, and the iOS, the PowerApps app with VoiceOver.
Okay.
And so those are all the different screen readers we intend to support. Not to say that it won't work with other screen readers such as JAWS and NVDA, but these are the ones that we're actively testing and supporting.
Wow, there's a lot of tools. I didn't know about any of these.
So we want to support these screen readers to enable them to read off the different elements that are inside of our app.
Gotcha. And this page that you're on right now, this is in our documentation under Create Accessible Apps.
Yep. Okay. Under the Canvas apps, customize an app. We tell you how to create an accessible app.
Yep. And I actually have that link already below the video. If you guys look down, there are 2 links. One of them is to this page.
Yeah. And so the other items, so I talked about keyboard support and screen reader support, but also layout and color. So for anyone, not just people who may have vision trouble or limitations, ensuring that you have proper contrast between especially text and background color can make the app a lot more usable for people. There's a reason why by default, like everything is black text on white background. It's because it has a high and crisp color contrast. And so that's one of the things when we're designing our apps that we want to do, choosing appropriate colors, white on a dark blue is good. And other ones we want to stay away from, yellow on white, and those ones that for people who are sighted, like you can see yourself which ones are easy to see and not.
Okay.
But there's also a lot of tools that are available online for you to go and look. Like even if I just, search like color, contrast, analyzer.
So these are key buzzwords: color, contrast, analyzer,
or checker, or there's so many different tools that you can use to help you identify these different problems.
I love the way Bing gives us a description at the top.
Yeah.
Little plug for Bing.
But yeah, so you can easily search up one of those to get them to help you to make good color choices. Yeah. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about is also making a good layout decision. So what do I mean by layout? Like there's a bunch of different layouts that you are able to make in your app, like oftentimes like people do master detail screens, or different, a form, you have all your different fields and the ordering of them. What a logical layout is important so that anybody who's interacting with your app, whether it's through a keyboard, through a mouse, or however they're using it, can follow it in the way that you intend them to use it in.
You mean the order by which you move around the screen?
Yeah, the order by which you move around the screen, but also just the way that it's visually presented. Okay. Now, it may seem silly, but in a form, if I have a bunch of fields and then I put my submit button in the middle and then I put another bunch of fields below it, like that's not very logical. Exactly. If I intend people to go and fill out all the fields on the form and then submit the button.
Yes.
Now, if I think about that, I wouldn't do that visually. I also shouldn't do that with the way that my keyboard should interact with the screen. So I should set my tab orders and interaction accordingly to the way that I would expect everyone to interact with my app.
So that when they press tab, they go to the next logical thing.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's kind of like in a nutshell, all the different types of accessibility things that we need to keep in mind there. There's other couple ones such as multimedia considerations like video controls and audio that we can also talk about. But
and
that's
we'll have you
like
come back again and kind of teach us more progressively.
Yes. So this one's really like your crash course, quick, what is accessibility? Okay. And then I hope actually in a couple months to come back and go into more detail about how we can go a little bit deeper and talk about more complicated scenarios such as creating dialogues and other different ones.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah, that'll be a little bit later. Okay. Right now, let's cover the basics so everyone can get to know what they need.
Are you going to show us some of this live in PowerApps?
Yeah. So
you can keep going. I just wanted to.
I'm
all excited now.
I have a little bit of slideware first, just to kind of set the stage for us. Okay. So we introduced something last week, the accessibility checker, and it's a tool to help app builders like identify, like it'll bring up the different errors in the app for you, as well as help you repair and get the information that you need in order to fix those.
I have seen that.
Yes.
I like it. Mm-hmm.
It doesn't cover everything yet, but it's certainly better than starting off manually trying to find all the issues in your app and maybe not knowing exactly what to fix.
Agreed.
So really, we've kind of taken it from a manual identification to a more guided experience. And so in that, I mean, like, we give you a list of issues, but you still need to have a brain, test out your app and, you know, make sure it's okay. And eventually it would be great to be able to move into like automatically detecting the way that you intend people to interact with your app and to, you know, prevent accessibility issues down the line, but we're just not there yet.
That makes sense. So we can see a clear roadmap, but what's important right now for today is that we do have some guidance we didn't have before.
Yes.
Okay.
That is correct. So in order to, we talked about before, like there's different keyboard support and screen reader support that is we need to use to make accessible apps. And so we cover some of these items, like the focus visible for a keyboard and the focus order guidance, as well as screen reader support items and some different usability settings that will make your app easier to use. And then one that we don't support yet is actually the detection of that color contrast, but we hope to introduce that in the future at some point.
Okay, perfect.
And so yeah, and now I can kind of jump into a little bit more
this is the
of
part
a demo.
I've been waiting for all night.
Yeah. So in our app, I just had pulled up a app here. So this is actually the Site Inspector app that is one of our templates. I just chose it because it's pretty straightforward to understand the use case, and we'll talk about different considerations in making it accessible. And so to start off, I just want to insert a blank screen and just add some items and show off the accessibility checker. So you can open it by clicking on this little stethoscope icon in the top corner here. It's the name of the tool is called the App Checker. And we did that intentionally because we're going to start introducing more things here that you should be excited for.
I just want to let you know, Emma, not to interrupt, but everybody's really excited about what you're talking about.
Okay.
But we just had Daniel Christian join us. He's one of our PowerApps MVPs.
Okay.
So he's excited too to
awesome.
be here today. Yeah. And Sandy's here as well, another MVP in our world. So great to have all these people are really excited about what you're doing. Just wanted to let you know.
Okay, awesome.
No questions yet, but I'm watching.
Glad to be here.
Yes.
So yes, the app checker is right now, there's two different items that you're able to use in it. One is for formulas. Yes. So on this page, would be actually a list of all the different errors that you might have in your app. Let me create one just now. So I have an error on my canvas, and before you just hovered on them, and if you clicked on them, they bring you to the different property that was affected. Now, if I look at my errors that are available here, I can click on them and I go directly to the property that has the issue. My focus goes right there, so I can go and fix that up. But I can also click on the chevron or select the chevron on the item to go and get a little bit more details.
Oh, I love that. That's a great idea.
Yeah. And so we're going to start introducing a little, we're going to fix up some of these error messages to be a little more helpful, which will be good for everyone.
So the first click on the error message took you to the new app checker.
If I click on this item right here, it brings me to the property that's affected.
Okay.
If I click on the chevron, it gives me more details about it.
That's wonderful. Okay, thank you.
Yes. So that's the formulas part of that one. Let me fix this up here. Now the accessibility portion works very much in the same way. So I've got all of the different items that have issues in my app, and I'm able to click on them to go to the property that's affected. So if I click on this guy, it brings me to the accessible label of gallery 3, which has an issue. And if I click on the chevron, it will also give me more information.
Okay, that's great.
And we're having some audio weirdness.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, so that's kind of the short version of the accessibility checker. And if I recheck, it'll go and check my app and bring up any different items. Like if I fix something or introduced a new error, I can recheck it and those will show up again.
Perfect.
So yeah,
so when you resolve them, they drop off?
Yes, they disappear from the list.
Okay.
So it's really a list of issues in your app. And so if there's something that's not in the list, theoretically, it's not an issue.
Now, is that panel showing the issues in the entire app or just the screen I'm on?
The entire app.
Okay.
So in this here, it tells you, right now we just have it sorted by issue because it's a little easier when you're dealing with accessibility issues to go by the different types. And then however, in the formula section, we have it ordered by the different screens on the app.
Okay, perfect. You have a question.
Yeah.
Well, not even a question. There are two funny comments. So first of all, Tenebris, I hope I pronounced that close to right. He loves what he's seeing. He's like, he thinks this is a great idea to implement some kind of debugging tool. He thinks awesome. Now, Interior Woodworking brought out, looks like he has a lot of work to do because he sees 338 missing accessible labels.
Oh no.
So
yeah, that's kind of why when I was talking about at the beginning, keeping in mind accessibility as you go along, it's less of a daunting task that way.
Okay, so maybe screen by screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So I want to put the accessibility checker aside for just a little bit, and I want to kind of dive in and just do some basics, how to make the screen keyboard accessible. Okay. And do keyboard support. So on my screen, generally I have two different categories of items, ones that are interactive and ones that are not interactive and are there for presentation only, or they are text. And so knowing the distinction between those two will really help you along the way when you're making your app accessible. Because really it always comes down to what you intend the use of your app to be. Okay. So if I go in and insert here, I'll insert, some buttons and, maybe an image and some other things. I'm just going to quick create a semblance of some sort of app that we can just work with the different order of elements that are there.
That's perfect. It doesn't have to be a really complex app.
No, I just want to walk through a simple example on a screen.
Okay.
So I've got my items here, and I'm going to insert, I said, an image, and also talk about just a bit. Okay. So this is not much, but
I think it looks great. I'll buy that app.
All right, I'll ship it. So, on this page, you could imagine, it's like a welcome screen or something where I have a logo or an image or something, and then a button that brings me to another screen, and maybe like an addition button that like I can go fill out a form, add something new. So on this screen, I can have different interactions here. So I would consider that this icon that I've added, it would be interactive because I'm going to be going and doing something when I click on it, as well as when I select it. And the same thing with the button, because the button is also, maybe it's getting me started. And so both of those items would require having a tab index on them in order for it to be accessible. And so we can find the tab index property in our property pane as well as in our advanced one. So now how the tab index numbers work, and so this is something I want everyone to listen up to, is it goes naturally from left to right and top to bottom, selecting the items that are on the screen. So we do a little bit of work for you. So if it's got a tab index of 0, it means, hey, this item is interactive and it will have a tab stop on it.
Gotcha. And this would be different if I was in Japan, because I'd be reading from right to left. So it depends on how you're reading. Yes,
it would depend.
Here in the United States, we go left to right, top to bottom.
That is correct. So I set my tab index to 0 if I want there to be a tab stop on it, and I want to use the natural ordering that PowerApps provides. If in my region. So the United States, left to right, top to bottom. And if I go and look at my icon, here I have a tab index of -1. So a tab index of -1 means that this is presentation only. This means that I will not have a tab stop on that item. I don't intend for people to interact with that item. It might not add a lot of value to what I'm doing.
So somebody who's tabbing would never get to that because it's -1.
Yes.
Wow,
and
I
so
never knew that.
If I want people to, go ahead and select this item, so if my onSelect property has something in it, generally I want my tab index to be 0. Setting it to 0 is best practices for all of my interactive items.
So as long as it's not negative.
Yeah. So, this image that's here, maybe it's not doing anything. It's just an image for people to look at. And so in this case, I want it to be -1 because, why have a tab stop to click on top of it if it's not going to do anything?
Makes sense.
Yeah. So that's kind of like the basics you should be thinking about when you're going through your app. When something is interactive and when it is not, and setting those tab indexes accordingly. So if it's a tab index of -1, it's presentation only, it's not interactive. Setting a tab index of 0 will follow the regular left to right, top to bottom, or inverse if you're in another region, ordering of interactivity.
Great. This makes sense. And so far, no questions.
Okay.
We did get joined by John Levesque from the Flow team.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so we get everybody on board.
On sounds good. So now I talked about 0 and -1. Now you're also able to set custom tab indexes as well. So if I wanted to, I could go and set this icon to 1, the image to 2, and the button to 3 in order to set a custom ordering for the way that I want people to interact with my app.
So you're kind of deciding what you want them to order. Sweet.
Yes. Yeah. So you can do that, but also it gets really hard to manage if you have a lot of different items on your screen, as well as we want the layout to generally follow that left to right and top to bottom pattern for general people who are using your app, as well as for people who are using the keyboard. So it's really best practice in order to design your app in a way that using the tab index orderings of 0 would work well.
For coherence.
For coherency, as well as if you do notice on a lot of general applications, that's exactly how it works. When people scan the screen, they look left and right and down to the bottom, and that's how everyone who is in a region that reads left to right operates. And so that's how your apps should also be designed.
Love it. I'm going to think about this, Emma. I haven't been thinking about this way. So thank you.
So that's kind of the short on focus ordering in your app. And we have a couple different errors associated with that. One is if you set the tab indexes on your screen to all those custom numbers, 1 through however many controls you have on your app, we will raise a tip just being like, hey, go check out your app and just make sure that the ordering is logical for what you're doing.
That tip would come up in the accessibility
check. Wow.
So there are tips.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different severities. So we actually have a new doc for our accessibility checker. You can find this by searching it. But I can also include the link below. And so it raises a couple different sections of severity. So errors of, yeah, I can zoom in. Mm-hmm. Does that show on the screen as well, zoomed in like that?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Okay, cool. So the errors, they identify issues that would make the app pretty much impossible or very difficult to use for users who need assistive technology or have a disability. Mm-hmm. So these are things like missing accessible labels and not having a good focus order or in focus visible, which we'll talk about in a second. Warnings are different issues that might make it difficult or to understand in some cases, but maybe not all. And so those are less severe, but you should probably still take a look at them. Okay. The tips are more just general information to help you improve the experience of the users. They may not necessarily stop people with disabilities from using your app.
Okay, perfect. Can I ask you one question related to the tip about the tab index? Mm-hmm. A lot of times we select more than one thing to set properties at the same time. Mm-hmm. Do you know what would happen if we set 3 things to the same tab index?
So if you set them all to 0, it would be the same. I actually don't know what happened if you set them all to tab index of 3 or something.
Okay, just wondering. I think in my mind thinks layers, whichever's in front.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll test it out.
I've never heard that.
We wouldn't want to do that normally, but I could see sometimes trying to cheat.
It happened? Okay. Yeah. Cool. So as well as in this doc, we have a list of all the different issues that are raised by the accessibility checker, and their severity and some more general information about them. So this is really a good page to go and take a look at if you're intending to use the accessibility checker, as well as the same link that's in the description of the video right now for creating accessible apps, which kind of talks about all the things that I'm currently talking about.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Right, cool. So we talked about focus order on our very primitive screen right here. And now I want to talk about focus visible. And what I mean by focus visible is being able to see what you have selected on when you have your keyboard focus. And so we can kind of look at this if we just go into our preview mode right here. So I can see if I'm clicking the tab button right now, and I can see that I have my icon focused right now.
Yes, I can tell.
It's got that border that's around it, and that's an actual property that's on the control. Yes. It's called focus border color. Yes. And if I tab again, I can see the thickness around the button as well. That's there. So if I shift tab back to go up on the screen, I can see it on there. And then I can see the thicker border that's on my button as well.
Tab is going forward, shift tab is going backwards.
Yep.
And then we're not touching this image because it was non-interactive and it's got that negative thing.
Yep. Yep.
-1.
Yep. However, if I did go and set my image to have an on-select property or a tab index, I would also need to make sure it has a focus border. Gotcha. And so let's just make our button a little more obvious on the focus order. So it's got the tab index of 0, and my focus border property is not in the front property screen. I can either get it through my list of properties on the formula bar here, or I can find it in the advanced pane. Where are you? Focus border color. So generally, the defaults will take the focus border color of the button and kind of make it thicker or larger. For myself, I actually really prefer making all of my focus borders the same color just because it has a nicer feel in my app. So depending on my color scheme, I generally like to do and just make them all black because it really draws the eye, especially on the lighter background color apps.
Gotcha.
Now, the other item that's important to keep in mind when I'm thinking about focus visible is also the focus border thickness that's around. So focus border thickness is the actual thickness of border that's around when you're focused. And the accessibility checker will raise an issue when this is 0, because if it's got a thickness of 0, it won't show up at all. And so generally best practice is to have it at, around at least 2.
Okay.
And so
it truly stands out.
Yes. So it stands out.
Do you suggest that all the focus borders be similar, like in the app? So like this focus border for the add button, add icon, and the button similar, or should you base it on what the item is that you're?
So I want to keep in mind my color contrast. So if, for example, I had this icon was white, and like we can do this right now. If I insert a rectangle in behind it, then I want my focus border to be able to be visible, right? Yes. So if I put this rectangle in and behind my icon, it's not going to show up because it's blue.
Right, yeah,
so
that makes sense.
I would need to change it to be white or another color that would show up well on top of the background that it's on.
Okay, and always keeping in mind high contrast from what you said earlier.
So there's 2 different types of contrast. So there's high contrast, and then there's also minimum contrast. And minimum contrast is the one where we're concerned about the colors that are visible and that we can see. High contrast is actually a setting you can have on your phone or your computer that actually inverts the colors, and there's a bunch of different ones that you can do. And if we get time at the end, I can show
perfect.
what it looks like. But generally, PowerApps handles that pretty well.
You're doing really good on time, by the way. You have a whole half an hour.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Sounds good. And so that's kind of, for keyboard support, it's making sure the order is logical, my interactive elements have tab stops, and that's pretty much it in a nutshell for what I would need to worry about there.
That's great, because I'm writing these down, and I'm telling you, you're schooling me, because I didn't know a lot of this stuff. And so now when I'm building my apps, I'm going to have these things in mind, and I think, I mean, to me, this just makes a more professional app as well in general.
Yeah, well, generally, there's actually a lot of legislation coming out now and in the last few years for certain applications and forms, especially in government institutions. They need to be accessible so that people using assistive technologies are able to use them the same that anyone else would.
Wow. Okay.
And so this is kind of really something that will, keeping these things in mind, not only helps you think about the intent of your app and how you expect people to interact with it, but will also help you reach a larger audience as well.
Totally agree. Thank you, Emma.
Yeah, so that's keyboard support in a nutshell. There's definitely a lot of different situations that you can go down a rabbit hole on how it should be ordered and other things, but I kind of just wanted to cover the basics for everyone right now.
Yep.
Cool. Now I want to move over to screen reader support and how we go and achieve that.
Awesome.
And so everyone, if you've opened up the accessibility checker, you will have noticed the missing accessible label items.
That's what they were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
They're noticing hundreds of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, depending on the size of your app, there can be quite a few.
Yeah.
And this generally goes, it follows the same kind of rule as the interactivity. If you have something that's interactive, like an icon, it's got to have an accessible label for the screen reader to read out. I'm not sure if will be able to hear narrator if I turn it on.
Probably not. I mean, sometimes whatever the computer's saying will actually create an echo.
Yeah, so yeah. I am hesitant.
We can all try narrator in our spare time.
Yes. So narrator is actually available on all Windows 10 OS. So you can literally type in here and type narrator. And this is available. And so this is the screen reader that I'd be able to use and test my app with.
I think I've actually hit that by accident, because once in a while my computer starts talking to me and I don't know why. I bet you that's it. Okay.
So really the best way to test your app is to actually just, take some time, tab through the different orderings that are there, turn on narrator and just see how it feels and the way it's reading. Now, you might want to turn down the speed at which it's reading because generally it's a little fast for people who aren't used to it, but those settings are all available in narrator.
Okay.
Now, how does the screen reader actually read out stuff to me as a person who's using it? There's a couple different items we need to keep in mind. A lot of the stuff PowerApps handles really gracefully and we don't have to worry about, but there are some items that we do need to keep in mind. So when the screen reader is on my app and going through, I have two different modes. I have an interactive mode of my screen reader, and I have like a browse scan mode of my screen reader, which is generally used for reading on a page. So if I'm using my scan mode on this page right here, I would go through and everyone can see my cursor so you can see where I'm going to go. I would look at all the different items that are on the page. If I have text that's of heading 1, a common thing for people to do is to just go and read the first titles that are throughout the different applications on web pages, just to get a feel the same way that a person who is sighted would skim the page and see. They would be able to skim as well all the different headings that are there. And so the other way is on interactive mode, I would go through and have all the different elements that I have focused read out to me. So if I'm focused on this icon that's here, oops, there we go. If I'm focused on this icon that's here, I want to give it a label that means something for someone. So the screen reader is going to read out that this is a button.
Gotcha.
So it reads out the value of the item, its role on the screen, and any accessible label that's associated with it. So what I mean by those, the value on this button would be get me started.
Gotcha.
So that's the value that's there and that's present. And it tells me that it has a role of button. The role is very important for people who are using screen readers because it tells them how to interact with all those different items. For example, if I have an item with a role of button, I know that it's selectable and I click on it and I expect it to do something.
Wow.
If I have something that has a role of radio button, I also get states that are associated with that. So if I had a radio button on my screen and I'm going through and navigating on top of them, I know that only one of those can be selected at a time because it's a radio button. And it will actually read out the other ones as selected or unselected as appropriate.
Gotcha. So these are properties in PowerApps?
No, these are actually set by the PowerApps control themselves. So since PowerApps, you're able to insert controls like this. We set that role automatically for everyone, which makes it it makes it a lot easier for people who want to make accessible apps, because a lot of devs will actually spend time making sure that all the different elements on their pro dev web pages have the correct ARIA roles.
So like a coder would probably set the role to button, but in our case, we're awesome. We're just set the role for button for them.
Yes.
And the radio buttons would have states automatically for them. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
And same thing for our toggles and drop downs and all those other items have the appropriate roles associated with them.
So how does this relate to the missing labels?
Yes, so I'm getting to that. So we have the value of what it is, if it has one, and the type of thing that it is, the role, which is set automatically. And then the accessible label will read out additional information. So a good practice is to have it say what the item is intended to do for the screen. Now, you don't want to put anything that's too long here because I want the same information that I would get if a sighted person were to see it. So if I have this addition button here, and my accessible label should probably be something like, if we're gonna like add a new item or add a new site or something like
descriptive.
Yeah, it should be descriptive, but I don't need to go overboard.
Write a book,
yeah, no writing book. You shouldn't say like tap the enter key in order to create the addition of a new
and don't forget that our policy is that you shouldn't blah 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 blah. Yeah.
So
this is not a tooltip. This is like, more of a help.
If you think about it, like you as anybody who's cited, like you just skim all that, right?
Yeah,
like probably
it's true.
Click on it. We should treat people who are using screen readers with the same method of concise wording that tells me exactly what I need to know.
You're awesome, Emma. These are great best practices. Like to me in general, like that applies to me to tooltips. Yes. You know how you can set tooltips? So, I think it's the same story. Yeah, right? Don't kill these people with a whole paragraph.
Of accessible labels as tooltips that aren't visible.
Gotcha. Love it. Okay, this is awesome. All right.
And so on my button, if I probably don't need an accessible label that's there, because the text that is there will be taken as the accessible label. So, get me started button, like that's probably descriptive enough. So there's not an accessible label needed there. For my images, it really depends on how important I think the image is. And so if I have like a trash can icon, I think I have a delete image screen that's here. So if I had just like a trash can icon that's on the screen, and I have the text, would you like to delete this image? And I have a delete button and a cancel button. The delete trash can icon probably wouldn't be that useful to me on this page. And so if it's not adding anything to my experience, it probably doesn't need an accessible label. And if I leave it as -1 tab index, you won't even see it.
Yes.
Because it's really not adding anything to my experience. Like it's just decoration.
Right.
And so making those decisions on images are kind of up to the person who is creating the app on how important they are. Now, if you set a tab index of 0 or the on select property of an image, again, it's interactive, so it requires an accessible label. So people who are using a screen reader will know what they're clicking on.
Gotcha. Okay, this makes sense.
Yeah, so that's kind of it for the accessible labels.
So another question, I noticed this pretty often in our templates as well. You know how you went to a page that had the delete and the kind of like a secondary dialog box after an ad. In this case, when you think about accessibility, should you lean toward less controls on the screen to keep it less busy?
So in terms of actually designing the app, it really comes down to the experience that you want.
Okay.
A person who is using a screen reader and keyboard will be able to interact with the screen no matter how many controls are on it. But it goes for anybody who is using your app for usability. You probably don't want to pack like every single control you have on one screen. Like you want to make it a nice experience and spread it out, make it, task focused and role based. That's really where creating custom apps in PowerApps really shines. And I would encourage people to think about the scenario that they want to light up for their users, whether they require assistive technology or not.
Okay. And just for everybody in attendance, we do have some design cards that help you design more coherent and succinct app screens. And I will make sure you have a link to that in the description too.
Yeah.
Are there any questions for Emma? Would you like her to demo anything in particular? Do you have any questions about your own apps? You can stop sharing the screen.
Oh, okay. Cool. Sorry, I just need to stop sharing there.
And are there any questions for Emma before we let her go? We want to make sure everybody gets their questions answered. Like I said, we have a lot of super users, we have MVP in attendance. We got John from Flow. We got great participation here, guys. We'd really love for you to help to amplify this video. Let people know that we now have great feature set for accessibility. And like Emma said earlier, the roadmap is not finished. We have more work to do to give you additional assistance with accessibility. And Emma will be coming back and schooling us some more on these different topics, because this is how we make those apps that mean business for everyone in our organizations. Whether they have disabilities or not.
Yeah, it's certainly a plus.
It is
to have around, not just a plus, but really it's the right thing to do in a lot of different scenarios. And most of the Office suite also has an accessibility checker for your PowerPoints and your emails and all of those items as well. And so by introducing an accessibility checker for PowerApps, we're kind of following along with Microsoft's general, mission statement of empowering every person.
Yes,
which
I love that mission.
Love.
It's on the back of our badges.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of conferences coming up soon. Emma, which ones will you be attending so that we can maybe try and sneak and meet you?
So I will be at the Business Application Summit.
Which starts on the 22nd of this month.
Yes.
Yeah, here in Seattle.
Here in Seattle, yes. I will be there for all of the days.
So the whole week you'll be there. Okay, great. So Emma will be there. If you want to reach out to us via Twitter, PowerApps,
I think it is.
PowerApps, and I'll put her Twitter handle below in the description as well. Feel free to reach out to Emma with questions on Twitter and or link up with her at the Business Application Summit. Will you be also at any of the other conferences, such as Inspire or Ignite? Or
I don't know about Ignite yet. I need to figure out what my plans are. I will be in Vegas. I'm not speaking at Inspire, but I'll be around.
So I'll be there too.
Okay.
So Em and I will try to get together, and you can reach out to either one of us next week in Vegas. John will be there too. So John just goes everywhere. So just expect John around the world this year. And reach out to us if you want to chat about these things. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to post them on the forum. We will add an accessibility forum, I believe, soon. Right now, you can use the Design Matters forum, or you can use the general forum to post questions, or reach out to us individually. We got a lot of thumbs up, smiley faces, really happy faces in the chat. Emma, everybody says this video was really good and the tips were powerful, and I agree. I mean, like I said, you gave us some real schooling today. So with that said, I'm going to let everybody go and have the rest of their day. Enjoy your week. Don't forget that the most important thing is to enjoy making those wonderful, happy Power Apps, okay? And we'll be talking to you soon at the next webinar or Friday Function video or one of those things. Have a great week.
All right.
Bye-bye all.
Thanks.